Hello, welcome to the Housing Sector Podcast. Today I'm joined by Steve Day, and Steve is another reluctant housing activist, like Dan Bruce, like Jackia, like Giles. And tomorrow, I'm not sure how these will come out, but I'm interviewing a guy called Matt tomorrow, another sort of housing activist who, through no fault of our own, none of us have chose this path. And Steve, you came to my attention because you shared a music video, a rap video, Signed Off But Not Safe, which has had 12,000 views on YouTube. That's an inspirational start and a different approach. How did that come about?
Well, back in 2020, it was that terrible time, just after Grenfell and all the regulations were up and sort of under review. We got told we were going to expect a £30 million cladding bill. And at that time, there was no protection. They were talking about leaseholder loans under Robert Jenrick. And we've had a fight basically, a technical fight exposing all the regulation breaches, all the unlawful construction, and we got the cladding manufacturer to investigate and condemn the building. We had a London Fire Brigade enforcement notice issued because of our technical arguments, not because they wanted to do it. We've had Barratt's own investigation after we pushed them really hard, and they found unlawful construction, which didn't help their case, and so on. Then the council, Greenwich Council, said all this evidence from the fire brigade, the Barratt, the 5 investigation reports from fire experts, and a signed court submission from the 2 building owners, all that evidence of unlawful construction at the time of build doesn't exist, and put that in writing, and has caused me. I've been attacked in the stairs by people, have had my bike threatened to be stolen, because they generally believe I've lied for 4 years about all these regulation breaches. And the council are not retracting their comment. It's been out there for 4 weeks. So we're in a big sort of battle with the council.
Okay,
And that's what that is about.
let's bring it back a few bits. First of all, who's the council? It's
Greenwich Council
Greenwich Council, and your home is where?
in Woolwich. So we've got
Woolwich.
really tall 80-meter plus buildings in a place called Royal Artillery Quays on the river.
Okay, and when you say unlawful, what do you mean by unlawfully being built?
Right. So what happens with the cladding is it's combustible material. So in our case, it was expanded polystyrene. And in order to justify putting that on, you've got to keep to the specifications of a BBA certificate, which is basically a safety certificate, which says if you install it with metal fixings with this level of render thickness, which is like the protective sort of stone coat on top of the insulation, and if you stick it on with a grid pattern instead of just getting your paintbrush with the glue and going like this, then you can rely on the fire performance test to say it's safe. Well, they use plastic fixings instead of metal on the fire break. The render was too thin, and the adhesive pattern was dot and dab instead of the grid pattern, right?
Right.
So they followed on all of that. The cladding manufacturer then was horrified that about, Barratt Homes, the developer, had installed their product in such a dangerous way and investigated after we caused up a stink and condemned it. And then it's been condemned in fire reports since then from Urban Change and Capital, 2 really big fire assessment experts, and then ultimately condemned in a signed court submission, which basically recognised that, going against a safety certificate of a cladding system when it's highly combustible is extremely bad and unlawful. The council says that evidence doesn't exist. And then on top of that, the internal walls that basically has loads of holes in it where there should have been fire stop. That's to stop the smoke and fire spreading between walls. We had an external report which said if there was a fire, there would be prosecutions against the building owners. It's so dangerous. Council says that evidence doesn't exist too. And then recently, the fire brigade have issued a fire brigade enforcement notice, which is the most serious notice below full evacuation, which says it's missing the compartmentation, which is a fire door at the bottom of each staircase to separate the lift from the stairs. Well, it's very obvious if that exists, that fire door. It does not on all 8 buildings. So they issued the notice. The council says that doesn't exist. It's an untenable position, but they're doing it for a reason I don't understand. Why discredit a 4 year residents campaign, just like the Grenfell Council did, where they ignored residents' concerns and just dismissed them? This is going a step further and saying all this expert evidence doesn't exist. Ignore the residents, and it's caused me tremendous harm at home.
Let me take it back and play devil's advocate a little bit. How do you go about collating all this evidence?
Well, it's easy. You ask an expert to come in, like a cladding manufacturer. You tell them Barrett's blaming you. They
Right.
think you're a rubbish cladding manufacturer. Come and investigate for yourself and prove that it's installed correct. They then work out if you're a credible enough threat. I'd been on the BBC National News twice for this. So by that time, I was also working the House of Lords with the Earl of Lytton to bring in consumer protection legislation, and that's drafted by the Parliamentary Standards Commissioner. So this is the true solution. I can talk about that if you like, to the whole crisis for everyone. And it's been tabled 8 times in Parliament, and it's going to be tabled again shortly. So all of that public profile that I built up, I guess, helped the cladding manufacturer decide to actually do an investigation for free. And
Right.
that's how we got our evidence. So that's how you do it.
So you've got your paperwork, you've got all your ducks lined up, and then you're going to your council. What did you expect to happen? Were you sort of, I mean, I would imagine that if I went to my council and said this is unsafe, they would be jumping on board to help make sure that the people responsible are held accountable and that the residents of their community are safe. But it doesn't sound like that was the case.
No. So, firstly, and this is a Labour-run council with a massive majority. I think there's 3 other councillors from other parties there. The rest is Labour. So we went to them and we said, we've got all of this evidence. And really scarily, Barrett want to leave a load of combustible XPS panels on our 16-story fire shafts without any fire performance test evidence to know the risk of leaving it on. Now, I had another fire engineer say that those combustible panels should never be on a fire shaft. That's your only way out. And with e-bikes and all of that, I thought the council would take that seriously. So I had this meeting, and they agreed to look into it. They never did. Then a bit later, we had a motion put down by a Liberal Democrat councillor at the time in Greenwich, which basically was seconded by a Labour councillor, which called for these dangerous panels to be removed from the fire shaft. And you would have thought, well, that's really good. Actually, maybe the council are finally doing something. She pulled out, this Labour councillor, of the Lib Dem motion 5 minutes before the deadline, so we couldn't get a seconder. So the motion fell because you need 2 signatures on it because it was just too late.
Did she give a
So we're
reason for
like,
why she pulled out?
well, it's just procedural, but yeah, right.
Right.
It's a very, very serious issue. You've got extremely highly combustible panels being left on a fire shaft, a motion for them to come off, and she's pulling out at the last minute. Anyway, it gets worse. So, yeah. So then I was like, right, that's really disappointing. So I stood for election. I thought, right, I'm going to stand as a councillor. I'm going to call this council out. So I got a 20% swing in December last year to the Lib Dems because I wanted to call this out. This is just wrongdoing. I came second. I was just missed it, but a large amount of the vote was from my neighbours. There's 1,000 of us here, and I managed to get them 1.3 million pounds for Waking Watch back, and I managed to save them 15 grand each on their landlord certificates because they were issued incorrectly. So, they're pleased with what I'm doing. So I did get there. So I thought, right, council will listen to me at least if I've had some success in the ward, just out of fear. So, then I basically pushed for a motion, and they did actually put down a motion for Royal Artillery Quays, but it was watered down. And so I asked for the Conservative councillor, Matt Hartley, leader of the opposition, to basically amend it and say take off the banned combustible stuff and fix all the illegal construction because there's enough evidence. And then I basically got this email from the Assistant Commissioner of the London Fire Brigade. And this commissioner said, we've made the decision based off your technical evidence and our reports to issue an enforcement notice. So I then get the motion that the Conservative councillor updated to say we welcome the decision. And the council then, when they heard the motion, struck it out and said there's no evidence of that LFB decision. And I said, I've got the assistant commissioner's letter. It's decision. It's not that it's been published. We welcome the decision. They got it struck out, and I had about 100 people there, and that caused me a huge embarrassment because people said I'd lied about the notice and about the assistant commissioner's email. Anyway, I put it up on Facebook and I managed to survive another day. But I was completely undermined by that council. And then finally, after more meetings where they said your London Fire Brigade notice, yes, you've got the decision, but it's going to be appealed. You're not going to get it through. Not we're really shocked that you've had to fight this hard for your safety. We'll support you. They told me, and this is the lead of the council and another councillor, that it's going to get appealed. It didn't get appealed. It's now published and you can find it. It's under Cumberland House on the London Fire Brigade Enforcement Notice website. But the other seven buildings haven't been issued. So now I'm having to fight for those because they're all missing the same fire door at the bottom. So finally, then the council, um, we thought, well, the council can help us. They do have a power under the Building Act 1984. That means if you've got unlawful construction that's not being remediated, because we've got a watered down remediation standard, which I'm sure Giles has told you about, this PAS 9980, which allows all the banned combustible material to stay on if the fire engineer decides that's a good idea, and also ignores building regulation breaches at the time of construction. So what we're saying is get your dodgy remediation done, and then the council does the rest. So they get the regulate the unlawful construction done. We were trying to set a precedent here, so everyone then has a route to a full remediation instead of the partial ones everyone is subjected to under the developer contract and the public funding. It's disgusting that we have this watered down standard post Grenfell, but there we are. So I went to the council. I said, you've got a clear power under the Building Act to apply for an injunction from a court to make Barratt do all the things the dodgy remediations aren't doing. They then said, well, we could use the power, but it's timed out 10 years. So then I went back and said, it's not timed out under 10 years, and gave a load of legal explanation. They said, oh, no, you're quite right. You're quite right. It's not timed out. But there's just no evidence of any unlawful construction. And I was like, and I was absolutely stunned because I'm sitting on a motherload of reports from everywhere, experts everywhere. And so they've done that just basically to discredit the fire safety campaign for over 4 years of 1,000 residents. And we've done videos, we've got loads of videos, not just the rap. I exposed all the internal defects in technical detail with the fire engineer, all on YouTube. We've done countless stuff on the BBC National News. We have a very good expose coming in My London shortly on the council's dealings with us. But post Grenfell, and this is where I'd like to come back to, the councils ignored the residents' evidence and their concerns. This is happening again in Greenwich right now. And instead of being listened to, hopefully that account shows just how much resistance I've had to endure with personal threats at home because of a council position which is totally wrong and untrue and flawed. And it's unacceptable.
So who are these personal threats? And you mentioned people talking about stealing your bike and whatnot. Who are these personal threats from?
Just residents. So I had a resident that threatened to steal my bike, and he referenced the fact that, we just don't believe you about all these regulation breaches. It's all in your mind. The council aren't going to lie. They're not going to go out there and say they've had external lawyers investigate all this evidence and it's not true. They're not going to lie about that. You don't have a fire engineering background. What are you talking about? You are a scumbag. And then it escalated and got really nasty. And because I said it's all true, I've got a court submission. I've got the fire brigade saying it. I've got 5 fire investigation reports. I'm not making evidence up. This is from experts. It's the council that has undermined me. And they said, you're a scum. And then said, what's your back and what's your bike? And then stormed off. And then, I've had other things. This is what the council have done to me. And it's undermining, just like the Grenfell residents. And it's extremely distressing, but I'm going to fight on, as I always do.
They were, wasn't it? And there was labeled as troublemakers. If the report was accurate, that they dismissed these Grenfell
Yeah.
have been dismissed as troublemakers. And for someone like myself, I come in and I go, well, surely the council are going to do something, and they're not. Why are the councils so reluctant? It's not going to cost them, by the sounds of it.
Well, let me just say just let me quickly summarize what they said. So they said there is no evidence that the original construction breached building regulations in force at the time. Okay, so the court submission says the external facade was not compliant with building regulations at the time of construction, right? That's pretty damning. Um, a capital fire safety report says the Weber cladding was not installed with the manufacturer's instructions or the building regulations at the time of construction. And then the really, really worrying one is Greenwich's own building control says the works carried out needed to comply with building regulations 2000. The regulations stipulate the entire fire shaft should be fully compartmentalized as it's the only means of escape. They said, we don't know why the work was signed off without any compartmentation at all. So they were like, and then we've got another report that says our survey establishes that the internal walls, as surveyed, currently do not meet the minimum statutory requirements, i.e., the law, at the time of construction. And without remediation attention, in the event of a fire, this will result in significant loss and possible prosecutions of the responsible person and the individual duty holders. So, this is quite damning stuff. The council says this evidence doesn't exist. So
So
they're just dismissing everything.
can you send me all these links so we can put them in the
Yeah,
comments so people can view this and make their own decision? And what sort
yeah,
of
absolutely.
what personal toil has this taken on you?
So it's been difficult because I've done a local campaign at Royal Artillery Quays, but I signed up 45 bishops from the Church of England, and then I managed to get a meeting with Lord Greenhouse back when the Building Safety Bill was going through Parliament and the Fire Safety Bill. And then I worked with some experts in policy to come up with consumer protection for buildings legislation. And it's simple. You don't go via the courts. It's just like your car. Your brakes don't work. You don't have to go to court and get the brake manufacturer. You go to the manufacturer and then they take the hit and they give you a new car. That's exactly what we would do with developers where they exist. If they use a temporary company, we use parent company liability to go from the SPV up to Barrow or Bellway or Persimmon and so on. If the developer doesn't exist, then it hits a wide construction industry levy with the cladding manufacturers in that have largely got away with it. And we spread it wide, and we've even created a variable rate levy, which allows us to levy at different rates for different classes of industry. So, like the builders have paid quite a lot, to be fair, in the developer contract. So, we could hit the cladding manufacturers a bit higher. So, it's some very, very clever legislation. And it's been written by Parliamentary Counsel Daniel Greenberg, who's now the Parliamentary Standards Commissioner. Um, and this took me about 75 weekends working non-stop and working on RAC as well, Royal Artillery Quays. We managed to get the backing of the Sunday Times for the legislation, the British Property Federation, the Association of Mortgage Intermediaries, ARMA, the Residential Managing Agents, Property Market, all the rest of it. And we will be back again in the Lords. The Earl of Lytton is tabling it at the moment. We had done previously, we had the Bishop of Manchester table it as a private member's bill, and we had Liam Fox table it initially in the Commons. And this is what we need. But that's pushed me into this limelight, and I haven't. You'd have thought that the amount of work I'm doing and the amount of, that I'd have had the support from everyone caught up in the crisis, but I haven't. And and I lost my one of my best friends. She had a massive bill for internal cladding defects. Her name was Amanda Walker. I don't know if you heard of her. Suspected suicide. She was going on a lot about suicide,
Yeah.
and she got Building Safety Act printed on her wall because she was so disturbed by the fact, as an enfranchised leaseholder, she was excluded. And she took a large number of morphine tablets and 3 bottles of vodka at the end. And the coroner very helpfully said it was misadventure. Well, it doesn't sound like misadventure to me. That sounds someone with intent. And,
Yeah.
you know, everyone can make their mind up on whether that was caused by her predicament or not. But she did go into a hospital. This was on the BBC News, so I'm not betraying anyone, for help because, the Building Safety Act and the failure of the Earl of Lytton's polluter pays amendments that we were working on together, and she talked in the House of Lords for it, failed, and I lost my best friend. It was devastating. I went to her funeral, and I'm still in touch with the family. And again, it's on the BBC National News. The government have watered down the remediation standards. They're watering it down now. Currently, there's a PAS 9980 2025 public consultation. The insurers are rejecting it because they don't believe in the tolerable risk. The First Tier Tribunal has rejected the tolerable risk standard in a judgment. They say it needs to be low and above. So it's not even really being accepted. Yet we're having this shocking post Grenfell partial watered down unwanted remediation standard applied to all of our remediations. And it's just not acceptable. And I need to do all I can in the House of Lords to stop it. And I will.
Look, we're recording this on the 20th of May. So next month is the anniversary of Grenfell. And I had a conversation yesterday. There'll be lots of housing associations who are putting up supportive posts on LinkedIn and X and Facebook, let's not forget, remembering the 72. How does that make you feel when you're in that same situation and no tangible support is being provided to you?
I just think what's sad is that we're missing the key areas of attack. We should be saying you've watered down the remediation standard so it doesn't comply with the regulations for new buildings, right? That's what we should be saying, not we're really sad or really sorry. Let's
Yeah.
hit them where it hurts. You've watered down the flipping standard. So, the new builds would never have the standard you're allowing for existing, creating a two-tier system. You say the insurers, they're rejecting the standard. My insurance doubled this year because of the remediation. If you're leaving the stuff on, you can blame the insurers, but they're pricing in the risk. Let's deal with the real issues here. And let's back the Earl of Lytton scheme, because as far as I know, you've got buildings under 11 meters totally excluded. People are enfranchised by their freehold at any point. They want to push for common hold, but this would lose them all of their protections under the Building Safety Act. Well, that needs to be brought out as well. You can't have common hold without the Earl scheme, because you need a protection that if you get rid of all the protections under the Building Safety Act through enfranchising, you need somewhere else for the money to come from. So I would say it's not very useful to say Grenfell is very sad, we need justice, if you don't have tangible ways. And one is the convictions. I'm a great supporter of that for those that broke the law and have escaped criminal charges. That needs to be escalated and expedited. But we also need a legacy for Grenfell of the shoddy building. And I was going to say a little bit on the stats. So just to give you and your listeners a little taste of just how bad the defects are, I did some calculations for BBC Verify and we put it on the national news. Taylor Wimpey, 77% of their blocks of flats have life endangering safety critical defects, 77 under the developer contract. That's shocking. Crest Nicholson, 69%. Bellway, 43%. Barratt, the new master builder, 35%. Defects so dangerous that they've been included in the developer contract as life safety critical endangering defects. That's what we're dealing with. This shoddy construction and the watered down remediation standards needs to stop. So I would say we need to decide, all of us as a society, do we back the Earl's consumer protection amendments for buildings, or does someone have a better idea? But I think we know that they don't. So let's support the Earl when he comes back to the House of Lords, and let's get behind him. So many times I've tried and I haven't been supported. Let's do it just
And,
this
and
time.
how can we support you? How can we? And I don't know much about this Earl of Lytton, and please forgive my ignorance. I come into these not knowing because I want to find out. How do we support you, Steve?
Well, go firstly have a read. Make your own decision. Does it make sense to you? Because I'm not here to sell something to you. I want people to back it because they really do believe it's a solution. So have a look at the buildingsafetyscheme.org website. It's got videos. Alison Hills, a solicitor, goes through how it works with diagrams and so on. Daniel Greenberg, from the lawyers out there, he's gone through very carefully how it works from a ECHR, European Court of Human Rights perspective, and how we get the liability through the parent company framework and so on. So there's a lot on there for any level of understanding, and of course the Earl's speeches are on there. You've got Amanda's powerful story that she
Yeah.
talks about the passions, the human side. Have a look at it, and then please just write to the Earl. Say we will support you. How can we help? The Earl of Lytton can be reached on lyttonj@parliament.uk, but again, it's on the website buildingsafetyscheme.org, and we need to get industry to support it because ultimately the insurers don't want rubbish buildings; they're taking on the risk. The lenders don't; they've got their security. If we want common hold, we need to say, well, if we want common hold and shared ownership of the freehold between people that actually live there instead of the freeholders, then we need to protect from shoddy building, because otherwise we'll be issuing service charges for 30 grand amongst ourselves. Imagine if I was like on the resident management company and I have to tell everyone you got a 30 grand bill. Do you think
Yeah.
I'm going to get lynched? I'm already getting lynched, and I'm not responsible for that. So yeah, those are ways to help. And also, I would say look at your building act under the council. If you're in a building below 80 meters and above 11, you can go to your council and say, use your powers under the Building Act to fix all the defects that the watered down PAS 9980 remediation is not addressing. And you can get your insurance down if you do that. So I guess those are the two main things.
Let's end on a human level. Do you feel, it sounds like such a ridiculous question. Do you feel safe when you go to bed at night? Do you feel like your home is your home?
Well, no, I mean, I don't feel safe because I've been told that the defects here are so bad at the moment that there'll be prosecutions if there's a fire. So, no, I don't feel safe. I've been told that the internal walls of fire shaft and the external walls are all that dangerous. So no one feels safe. I'm also being attacked because the council put out false statements by neighbours.
Yeah.
So no, I don't feel very safe from a fire safety point of view, from a resident's point of view. And also, it's very, very hard being in the public domain campaigning for legislation. There's a huge amount of other things that go on behind the scenes. It's not so nice, it's not very nice, but it's worthwhile. And I
Yeah.
believe in this. We need consumer protection for buildings, and I won't stop until we have it. It might be my life's work, but I will be continuing with this because I think we need it. Those surely those statistics of a 77% life endangering defect rate tells you 1.5 million pounds, and we're letting the builders off by watering down planning regulations and watering down remediation standards right now as we speak. Something's going wrong right now. It's not just the past, it's the future, and we need to act as a society to tell our government to change. And that's what this amendment does from the Earl of Lytton.
Steve, thank you very much indeed. Keep up the great work. Stay strong. And all the links that you send me will be in the comments field so people can make their own mind. They can make their own decision, you know. But I fear the next Grenfell is on the horizon, isn't it?
Well, just if you look at the Olympic Park, you've got the Olympic Village, and there was, I think, 432 million pounds worth of internal defects found. That gives you an idea. This government needs more money, and the Earl scheme will provide it because let's say 15 billion, I think they've got of public funds, and
Mm.
you've got a limited levy. It's not going to cut it if you've got 432 million for one development or one area. You know, we need to be thinking very carefully about fixing these buildings properly instead of watering down what we're doing. And that's going to need more money and a decent solution instead of a partial one. And that's what we're campaigning for.
All right, let's get you back on in a few months' time to see how things are going. In the meantime, thank you very much indeed. Stay strong, Steve.
Thank you. And thanks for having me on.
You're very welcome.
Couldn't
Let's stop.
unsee what I saw or know what I know now. And when we became non-qualifying, that was just the icing on the cake. It's like there's just this black chasm ahead. And we were told, we had a meeting following the email, get ready for 70,000, 200,000, and get ready now. So that was 3 years ago. Still haven't had that big bill, but now I'm going to get it because this is the thing. It's the unknowing, and then watching the Building Safety Act went through, and one by one they all got kicked out along with polluter pays, all the amendments that would have protected us. And then when I found out I was considered non-qualifying, it was, I mean, again, penny dropped immediately. Like I said, a two-tier system. Why would anyone buy a non-qualifying in perpetuity flat? I wouldn't, what I know. So we're in the process of having our external works done, but obviously the internal works, we failed everything. We got a B2 rating, there's polystyrene behind our walls, there's no fire breaks, no compartmentation. And as they're doing the external works, we're having regular meetings with the construction company, and they are finding more and more defects that aren't covered by the Building Safety Fund. So it's just escalating. It's we cannot pay. It's impossible.